Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined by Robert Cook. And today we're going to talk about everyday tech reshaping modern warfare. Bob is a U.S. Army vet and military tech expert, and we're going to talk about drones, drone ships, drone wars, drone everything, which obviously is a hot topic given the situation in Ukraine and elsewhere. So, welcome, Bob, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, why don't we begin from the beginning? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and we'll go from there.
Well, it's been an interesting topic set. I'm the author of a book called The Mahdi, which is current with the Middle East. But before that, starting in college, I was a math major, went in the Army for 5 years and, got to go to beautiful places and shoot people. And then I got in the high-tech business, started 3 or 4 companies, then sold those all, got in the venture business, kept that, got in the wine business, and then I decided to write books, and here I am.
Well, why did you decide to get into writing books?
I decided to go back to Vietnam just to get a feel for it in the 90s. And we were on a cruise ship. And when we left Saigon, down the Saigon River, we were going to go north to Da Nang, and we hit a cyclone, a tropical storm. 60-foot seas, 40-foot winds across the bow. And it was quite exciting. There wasn't anybody that wasn't seasick except me and the crew. So I picked up my computer and started writing a book, and that was the first of the 4 Koosh thrillers.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us about the first book you wrote?
The last book I wrote was
the last book you wrote, of course. Yes.
It was about my protagonist, who is half Bedouin American, half Bedouin, half American. So he's a Bedouin American, and his leadership. He's living in Tangier at the time. And the Bedouin leadership came to him and said they wanted him to resolve the issue with the Israelis confiscating Muslim land in the West Bank. And he said, well, I understand the problem. Everybody's written about it. But I can't imagine that they're going to want to do anything about it. And that's where the votes are. And he gets further along, meets with the prime minister, who turns him down again. He gets drugged and thrown in prison. And then he gets into a skirmish with the Israel Defense Forces and wins. And so they end up bringing the Middle East to modernity because he meets with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. He meets with the President of the United States and the new Prime Minister of Israel. And they, between the 3 of them, agree to rebuild Jerusalem and bring the Middle Eastern world to modernity. And to begin that, they start teaching K through 6. So that was an exciting way to get into the book.
So besides just being on a random cruise ship, what inspired you to write this story? What made it compelling for you?
And I think it was February of 2018, I was reading The Economist, and they talked about Israelis were confiscating Muslim land in the West Bank, and without any compensation, on the theory that if you're not Jewish, you can't own land in Israel. And that's a theocratic thing. It's against the rule of law. So they had the International Court of Justice and everybody else coming down on them. And I thought, wow, there might be a story here. So I tried to track it. And sure enough, with my protagonist and his living in Tangier, it was easy to get him started on that story. And the story before that was almost the same thing. Pulse, where you see what's going on in Iran. And the U.S. does a preemptive attack on Iran, and I write about it. So anything you want, I can write about.
So what's your writing process like?
It's sort of random. I might write for 3 or 4 days for 8 or 10 hours a day and not do it again for a week. It usually takes me more than a year to write a book. I'm thinking about it the whole time, but it has to come together the way I want it to come together. And so you write it, you edit it, you get it published, but it takes me quite a while, and it's not a daily thing.
Do you plan out the story in advance, or you just kind of write it as it comes?
I sort of knew what was going on. You know, you think about what's going on in the West Bank, you say, well, Prime Minister's not going to give it up. And my book had a happy ending. The ending that's going on right now isn't quite so happy. Prime Minister never gave up the right-wing Orthodox. And so the land is being, as we speak, attacked again by this right-wing settlers. So it was a good story and it's current. It keeps on giving.
Absolutely. Well, that's very interesting. Let's turn our attention to military tech and drones, which is what you were kind of booked in for initially. There's been a lot of conversation about China's new drone carrier and cheap, inexpensive drones being the future of modern warfare, as opposed to ever more expensive and exotic fighter platforms and all this type of thing. How is drones changing modern warfare?
I don't think it's drones. They're a byproduct. It's artificial intelligence. In order to fly a smart drone, you need artificial intelligence to figure out the rules. And so we'll see a lot more in artificial intelligence. And President Trump just announced a big initiative to increase our presence in artificial intelligence. And Musk is an artificial intelligence maven. A bunch of the others are there. And so that's where the battle is going to be fought. With drones, the biggest advantage I think the military sees with drones, there's no people on them.
Right.
You know, we'll spend $2 million to pick up a pilot. And if he's in a $50 drone, let it burn.
I mean, yeah, so we initially kind of saw these drones start to come into use in Iraq and Afghanistan, particularly in Afghanistan, and kind of throughout the Middle East. And then Obama stepped that up, and Trump did a little bit, but not much. And then Biden basically shut all of that down. And those drones are military, and they're a little bit more expensive, but less than an F-35, which is very expensive. Do you feel like America's losing our edge in drones? Are we ahead? Are we behind? We're getting into fighter gap, missile gap, bomber gap here in a minute.
Well, let's look at what could happen in Israel. Israel has the Iron Dome system. Iron Dome system. It was built to shoot missiles at airplanes.
Right.
And now they're sending $250 drones over by the hundreds.
Right.
And they're using $1 million missile to shoot a $500 drone. That math just doesn't work. And so drones are a real big thing right now because they can overwhelm existing defenses and do it very inexpensively.
True. Have you seen that new defense they have that uses microwaves to blow up drones?
I've seen the one where they have lasers to blow up drones, not to microwaves.
Yeah. Well, is that kind of the new sort of missile defense thing, is that we're going to need to put in, drone defense systems?
Well, the United States has been working on laser weapons since 2010. They deployed one in 2014 on the Ponce, had some successes, and now there's one out on the Gerald Ford that they claim, and this is a key point, can shoot down 10,000 drones in an hour. And it does it cheaply, but it's a power hog.
Good.
It's really a power hog. And so where do you get the power? Well, from the twin nuclear reactors on the Ford, but there aren't that many of those around. So it's an evolving technology. It's an evolving weapon set.
Absolutely. Obviously, there's been a lot of kind of mention made about China and its new drone carrier and all this type of thing. How much do you think a threat like that really is?
I think it's a threat for sure, because you can get the drones before they launch them a lot closer to the target, and then service them with a mother drone or a mother ship. I think more dangerous is what's going on subsea, where they're using subsea drones controlled from a very quiet submarine. And
Yeah,
they'll wreak some havoc if that happens.
certainly. Although, I mean, I kind of wonder. I wonder how much of that's effective given the fact that China's ships don't usually have the capabilities or logistics to travel much beyond their territorial waters. They're a bit lacking in the Blue Water Navy Department. Do you think that's going to hold them back in their drone efforts?
Well, it'll hold them back for a while, but their Blue Navy is growing in a hurry. And their submarines aren't so good. They still diesel submarines are quiet. But if they have to surface to recharge, they're dead. And they do.
Right.
So they're working on it. It's a problem.
Yes. That's absolutely. When it comes to you, one of the things that was mentioned was the kind of ordinary commercial drones. We've seen those used in Ukraine a lot. What do you think is the threat profile with those?
Well, you can build one for $250 and attach a conventional munition with it and then crash it into something. That's cheap and accurate. Or you can build a slightly more expensive drone and have it carry things and just release them and come back and get some more. So we've changed the B-2 from a $5 billion airplane to a drone at $5,000, and both can do a lot of damage.
So, I mean, I guess what is this, in your view, what does this mean in terms of defense, in terms of how, the military goes forward? How should the Pentagon handle this new type of warfare?
Well, I think we have to revise the whole procurement system for one thing. And I think Trump knows that and it's going to happen. The procurement system is broken. And what we get in the way of new technology, we get from DARPA mostly,
Right.
Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. And CIA has a little venture firm out in Silicon Valley that runs around and checks new technology and vets it. That's not a good enough supply chain to compete with a country the size of China. And they're dedicated to building what they need to build to be dominant.
Well, where would you begin fixing all of that?
Well, I think that Trump's on the right track. If the AI is more advanced than the other guys, I mean, that's a big, big advantage. They can have more advanced drones. And if you are way behind on the AI side, some laser will come along and shoot them all down or something else they think of. The game is going to be played with artificial intelligence. And everybody knows it. And it's going to be 10 years. So we have that period of time to figure it out.
I mean, I guess that all seems a bit frightening, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I don't feel good about my grandchildren and their planet to live on.
That's a little sobering. That's a little bit sobering. Yeah, that's a kind of a difficult sort of thing. So how did you you said you were in the military for a while. How did you get into studying this whole drone and warfare angle?
Well, more because I was in the Army Reserves and I'm a tech guy.
Yeah.
I ran 2 software companies. I ran a 3rd secure messaging company. I've invested in 10 others. So I've had people spoon feeding me information for many years. After a while, you can feed yourself.
That is true. Well, what I guess got you interested in technology and staying in the industry and being such a big part of it?
Well, I think it was part of the jolt coming out of the military. When I was in the Army for 5.5 years, and the thing that I found after I got out of the Army that I didn't realize when I was in was that it runs on mission. There's a mission, and you go for the mission. On the outside, a lot of it runs for purpose people's personal ambition, and the mission gets lost in the telling. So I kept up with people I knew. Two of the people that made comments on the cover of my book, The Mahdi. One was Jim Loy, who was a former commandant of the Coast Guard. So I've known him since high school. And, you keep up a little bit there, and he is known as the best operating manager DOD ever had, except maybe Dwight Eisenhower. And so you're around people. I suppose once you're in your 20s and 30s, the crowd you're going to be around is set. And part of the conversation is national security and how do we survive this and how do we survive that. There's a lot of similarities between business and warfare, as people have told us for the past 600 years. But you just stay with it. I think that, for example, the Japanese were able to defeat the Russians in the early 1900s without taking any casualties because they had discovered a cannon that would shoot 5 miles farther than the Russians. And they were out in the ocean, and they were just blowing up all the Russians. And that doesn't last very long, but while it lasts, it's ugly. And I don't want us to be the wrong side of that kind of bad planning.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a kind of a parade of AI people, and I think the danger with AI is so tremendous, as it affects so many other areas of society. In your view, what are the dangers of AI in warfare?
Well, the guy that has the best AI wins. That's the biggest danger.
But it also seems to me a lot of things can go wrong, don't you think?
Oh, a lot of things can go wrong. A lot of things can go right. In the Mahdi, I started talking about chatbots in 2012.
Yeah.
And it became a hot topic last year when the AI chatbot came out. But it's been obvious that technique of using an intermediary in AI is the obvious one. You get around language limitations, you get around memory limitations, you always remember what happened. And when you hear about people training AI, they're just getting more data to it. So it can have more data to look up and make decisions that you programmed into it. But boy, it's fast. And it happens in a big hurry. And everybody's programming stuff into it, not just you. And so that is the exposure of AI in the DoD world, that you have an airplane with no people in it that you can't see with radar because their radar is better than your radar, that kind of thing. Just can't let yourself go there. Just can't do it. It's interesting that I read my books from the point of view through the lens of a Muslim American because it was more fun than doing it as an American. And as you look at Israel, and that appears to be coming to an end, Israel-Gaza, Lebanon-Hezbollah conflict. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens because you had 2 billion Muslims watching Islam slaughter 200,000 Palestinians and getting away with it. And that just didn't go away. That kind of bad feeling doesn't go away very quickly.
No, I mean, I think there's also been, so much backlash in the West as well with student protests and all this sort of thing. I think if anything, with what's happened in Gaza, Palestinians come out more sympathetic from this one.
They come out more sympathetic?
I think so, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. They're just getting slaughtered. It's hard not to feel for the Palestinians, but the issue is Israel is a country the size of New Jersey, with the population of New Jersey, about 6 million.
Right.
surrounded by 200 million Arabs. I mean, that
Right.
just doesn't work if you don't behave yourself. And I'm not sure Israel is behaving itself. The right wing, the Jewish state, expects everything from the West Bank of the Jordan River to the ocean to be part of Israel, because that's what it says in the Torah. Well, the West Bank's not, it's occupied. And Gaza was a Palestinian state, both granted since the 1948 unpleasantness. That's going to make things ugly for a long time there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a conflict that doesn't have an endpoint anytime soon. This is a nice temporary ceasefire in a greater conversation that will be continuing on for a long time.
Yeah, I tried to end that conversation in the Mahdi book by having the three powers get together and rebuild the Middle East. And that isn't going to happen anytime soon, given that it's just not going to happen.
Yes, no, certainly that is certainly true. I don't know. I think it's all very very fascinating. What do you think is the biggest difference between working in tech and doing investments and writing a book?
Working in tech is all about marketing. I mean, you got to get the idea first. But if you don't know who the customer is, you shouldn't build it. You got to build something for a customer you have in mind, because without that, you're not going to have anything. And writing a book is a lot easier than that, but it's not nearly as lucrative.
Well, that is true. I would know. I've been a full-time artist writing books all this time, and so I understand about the whole not lucrative aspect of things. So that is certainly a problem. I unfortunately have no talents that the tech industry is interested in at all. So I was not present for that whole wave over the last several years. So I don't program, I don't code. I'm useless to them.
It's a big wave to miss. A lot of your peers made a lot of money.
Yes, a few of them did, absolutely. But again, I no talents in that realm, unfortunately. So there was no room for me at the end, but that's okay.
We all have the advantage of being born male in the United States, which is the ultimate advantage.
True. I mean that is a pretty big leg up. Although I have to say it's never done much for me. So it's yeah. I've never really had the chance to do a whole lot with whatever it was that I had to contribute. The economy in the world doesn't have a lot of use for people like me anymore. So it's those of us who study things and research things and know things and investigate things, there's very little call for us these days.
Well, you're a journalist and you do those things.
I do, but so little call for it these days. So it's a difficult thing. So, well, I would like to wrap up our little chat. Why don't you tell us where we can buy your books online and where we can keep up with you on social media?
Well, there's a website called robertkochnovels.com, and all five of my books are there.
Oh, wonderful.
One of them was a young adult book I wrote. You can identify with this. Sold 15 copies. I bought 10 of them.
Yes,
I don't
absolutely.
young adult books.
Yes, no, I totally understand. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. I really appreciate talking to you.
It was wonderful talking to you. Thanks for the chance.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.